I think a person watching this might have recalled that earlier on I mentioned that I came from a middle class home. Maybe middle to low class, but I think probably would be classified as middle class. And that being the case, it means that funds were not as abundant as one would hope. I wasn't exactly deprived of going into the tertiary institution environment, but me being able to get onto a learnership program with SAQCC meant that I didn't put that financial strain on my parents, whereas that's something that I'm not sure how it would have affected them because it didn't occur, but I'm sure it would have made things more difficult, which is of course not a good thing. And not only that, but from the beginning started to impact my life, because I started off with a starting salary. I mean, I was young, probably a bit too immature actually, and going into the workspace and also being able to study, going through the process, it was highly beneficial. It helped me to grow up, and I started to, I from that point started to, spread roots and to develop my character and find my place in the workplace and in a greater level in society. My name is David. My surname is Boyles. I don't have any nicknames that I currently go by as an adult, so there's no point in me mentioning that. I'm from SURNAME in Durban. I am is what is referred to as a CPPV. That's an acronym for Competent Person / Pressure Vessels. It's a very specialized field, as I mentioned. You've got a competent person, boilers, and the other routes, fabrication routes in the inspection field, which is what I do, is an IPE, inspector pressurized equipment. But yes, to answer the question specifically, my title is CPPV, but loosely speaking, I'm an inspector. Did physics, maths in high school, did all my subjects in high grade, in fact, and by the time I had completed matric, I had applied for civil engineering. In fact, initially my first choice was to be a pilot, which I find out now later on that that's actually not something that I would have enjoyed at all, so that's kind of a blessing in disguise, but I didn't meet the criteria either. What I did think was a practical option for me, something that I did initially go for, was civil engineering, and got accepted to study at DUT. But around about the time that, in fact, I missed the initial course to start period. I should have applied beforehand, but wasn't a person that was very, proactive with regard to my academics, to be honest and frank actually. So when I passed matric, I didn't apply in time and was going to start off on the second semester. Well, they were doing it in different stages, of course, so that's why I initially started mid-year. And around that time, my father, who was working in Sasol, Secunda, he was working for one of the service providers, Floor, but of course now having networks, he contacted me and told me, knowing that I was still, a bit more open-minded as to what career path I would follow, he contacted me and told me that there's this really good opportunity available in this field called inspection, and there's a starting off salary, and which would exponentially increase as I progressed in the learnership program. So I did research and found out that it was quite an interesting field, very. You would need to apply yourself, your intellect, and it was intellectually stimulating. So after researching, I thought, okay, no, I'm definitely going to apply for this, at least just to see where it would go anyway. and I got contacted. They got back to me. I went for an interview. I passed the interview, and I think that from there the rest is history. I went for psychometric and aptitude tests and got into the learnership program. It comes to the main qualification that I have through the learnership program, which was to qualify as a competent person, that's CP, as I described earlier. I believe that you need a matric pass. So if you do a CP course, just a CP course through the South African Institute of Welding, which is something that anybody can do if they want to become a competent person to inspect pressure vessels, then okay, so I'll start with that. You do your course, and then from the point where you get your pass in the course, you then have to show continuation of inspecting pressure, or actually being a part of inspections being carried out on pressure vessels over a 2-year period, and there's a minimum of 10. There's an actual application form that you now get from the website of the institute, and you put down all of the particulars required, including your own, and put through your application. If they find you fit, then they give you your qualification. There was dye penetrant testing level 1 and 2. There's magnetic particle testing level 1 and 2. Ultrasonic testing level 1. There was paint and coating inspectors. There was RT interpreters that was done as well. ASME codes of manufacture, boilers, competent person boilers, the actual courses now, not the qualification which you need to collect vessels for, or boilers in that case. I did the competent person pressure vessels course, and there's a plant modules that they let you do as well. I think the plant modules is also a requirement for your competent person these days as well. So, and of course there was welding and fabricators level 1 and level 2 as well that I did, and that's about it as far as I can recall. Going through my learnership program with SAQCC, I started off with doing NDT actually, because the way the learnership program was structured in a nutshell was 6 months of theory courses, coursework. We'd then went to the refinery for another 6 months to get some practical experience. Then we went for another 6 months of theory work, and then returned to the refinery for another 1.5 years to complete our learnership program and qualify subsequently. So of course, naturally, the first 6 months was theory work. Then we went to the refinery and we carried out NDT roles, but also at the same time also picking up on insights and experience from the qualified inspectors and more experienced inspectors. At first to work as piping inspectors, because after we returned, after our second 6 months of courses, we actually qualified as piping inspectors. So we needed to learn how to inspect pipelines actually. And past that point, we then worked towards pressure vessels. But of course, everything was happening coercively, and we were learning how to inspect pressure vessels as well, and worked with the qualified inspectors then. And by the back end of it, we qualified as pressure vessel inspectors as well. That covered my employment with SAQCC. I did the learnership program for 3.5 years. I left 6 months after I qualified with SAQCC, so I think it was actually 3.5 years, including the 6 months. Thereafter, I gained employment with Intertech, which, so it was Intertech, to not go too deep into it. With Intertech, okay, so just to clarify, when working for SAQCC, my job was as a zone inspector. I would inspect piping at first, but thereafter pressure vessels, which is a range of pressure vessels in the petrochemical environment, and also storage tanks. That made it my core function. When I left SAQCC, I joined Intertech. Intertech has got a different role than what SAQCC has. See, that the whole idea is that actually when qualifying as an inspector, CP or IPE or CP boilers, because I was referring to pressure vessels, of course, you work for something called an AIA, an approved inspection authority, we are actually, in a rough sense, representatives of the government. We work for what's called the chief inspector of the country, because pressure vessels are regulated in our country. Anything that operates above 50 kilopascals of pressure is recognized as pressurized equipment, and thereafter it starts to be regulated, and that's where we come into it. But with refineries, you get something called a Type B inspection authority, where you work directly for the client, being the refinery, almost like seconded to them. Whereas with Intertech, that function changed for me in that sense, that I was no longer working for a Type B inspection authority. I was working for a Type A inspection authority, where we work independently, completely independently to the client. And also my functions changed in that Intertech carries out a lot of fabrication, not fabrication work, but we work in the fabrication environments. So typically, for example, I was involved in fabrication and modification of piping, tanks. I was involved in some pressure vessel fabrication, never ever mods in that regard. But in fact, most of my work consisted of me working in a fabrication environment when working for Intertech. My employer is Intertech Industry Services. I'm a contractor to SAPREF Refinery. The role that I occupy in SAPREF Refinery is a zone inspector. My functions are around asset integrity management in the refinery, but this is more on a statutory level because of regulations in place in the country, pressure equipment regulations in particular, acronym PER. Piping is inspected. Well, I carry out piping inspections and pressure vessel inspections. There's tankage inspections as well. I don't carry out that, but there are tankage inspections that are done as well. We also carry out other functions that involve the safety accessories of the equipment. There's different procedures, there's different ways that this is managed, but ultimately all kind of gravitates around the asset integrity management. We consider fouling, we consider wall loss, corrosion, we look at the reliability of the equipment. There's sometimes even infrared thermography that's employed to consider the thermal transfer and heat exchanges. These are the basic rules. Where I see myself in 5 years' time is having studied mechanical engineering, because in fact it's quite interesting. Inspection and mechanical engineering go hand in hand. We, as inspection, we fall within the mechanical engineering arena and department. Literally, like for example, SAPREF Refinery, it's in the engineering department. I want to study mechanical engineering with the hopes that I could progress into a different, a greater role, like perhaps inspection management.